King Junior Memorial. What does this say? We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
And now we approach the monument itself. It was inspired by a quote from the I Have a Dream speech. And that quote is, "We will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope." Speaking of hope, let's talk about what might give Americans hope for a less racist, more peaceful, and more fair America. First thing I might as well mention is MLK's support for a guaranteed income, also known as a basic income. We discussed this in quite a bit of detail in a previous video of mine that focused also on Martin Luther King. I hope you check that out as well. I'll link it at the end of this video. And speaking of income, we need to make sure that people are being paid fairly for what they do for their jobs, because if you look into it, people of different races and genders are often paid less than what a white man doing the same job is paid. So we have to make sure that wages are equal. On a related note, when people get out of jail, we need to make it easier for them to get a job, because they're often discriminated against for having been to jail. And so it's really difficult for ex-convicts to get a job. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because black people in our country are disproportionately jailed because we have a racist police force. I mean, not all cops are racist, but we have a lot of racist cops. And this, of course, brings me to another point. We need to fire racist police officers. Just fire them outright. And then train better police officers to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Racially sensitive? Yes, that's the word. So we need to, actually improve our police force, basically. Now, before we move away from the whole jail thing, because that's not all we're going to be talking about today, but one other thing I want to mention is we should also release anyone who's in prison because of minor drug offenses. Mostly I'm talking about people who are in jail for smoking marijuana, because, come on, that's fucking ridiculous. So yeah, their criminal records should be fucking erased. All they did was smoke some marijuana. It's not a big deal. And also, I've heard many times in the past that black people often serve much harsher sentences than white people for doing the exact same kind of crime that white people do. So obviously that's something that needs to be corrected. So I guess you need to train judges. Yeah, the judges would be the ones in charge of that. So train judges to be more racially sensitive. Yeah, I guess that would be the solution there. Let's talk about education. We need to convert all private schools in this country into public schools. All education should be under the jurisdiction of the government, so that way we can have equal opportunity education for all students. Also, the government can do a much better job of making sure that classrooms are better integrated. Also, I believe schools should be doing a better job of teaching about other world cultures through history classes and also art classes. Okay, so from here let's move on to the vote. studies have shown that voter ID laws are meant to suppress minority rights. So, we obviously need to fight against voter ID laws. Another thing, we need, well, this next thing I'm about to say isn't so much a race thing, but just something I'm going to shoehorn in here. I think we should lower the voting age to 16. I think it'll just help America in general, so let's do that. Alright, so getting back on track, there is, of course, gerrymandering, which is, of course, a tool used by politicians to screw over the opposing political party, but it can also be used as a way to screw over minorities. So there's a number of solutions that have been proposed on how to stop gerrymandering. You can look that up on your own. I'm not 100% sure like which would be the best way. It's a thinker. Anyway, let's move on to I just want to point out that it's an issue that we obviously need to tackle. But anyway, let's move on to our next subject. So, I believe we need to give statehood, or at the very least voting rights, to Puerto Rico, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, United States Virgin Islands, and American Samoa. The U.S. does have other territories, but I believe those other territories are just military bases, so those ones are mostly uninhabited, whereas the 5 I just mentioned are very much inhabited by people who have been denied the rights to vote, and that is bullshit. We also need to fight against Trump's racist border wall proposal, and on that note, we need to remove Donald Trump from office, and we need to do that either by impeachment or by election in 2020. Either way, he needs to be out. I'm sure there are other things that we could discuss, but I'm mostly just coming up with issues off the top of my head here. Anyway, so if you have some other things, some relevant things that you feel I should have mentioned, definitely mention those in the comments below. One last thing that I want to mention, though, is that if we want to tackle many of the issues that we discussed today, one of the pathways that I think would get us to the solutions that we want, that would bring about these changes, would be if we go after getting money out of politics. Because right now in America, many of the laws that get passed are not what Americans actually want, but instead are what corporations want, because corporations have these lobbyists who, put money in the pockets of our politicians, so our politicians are pretty much bought and paid for, so we don't really get, or at least we often don't get, the laws passed that we want. I mean, our votes do matter, don't get me wrong. The votes do matter. But we are still being held back by money's influence in politics. And the reason why is because the corporations are constantly fucking with our rights. Because they have so much leverage over our politicians. So if we want our politicians to actually represent us, and if we want our politicians to actually do the things we want them to fucking do, then we need to get money out of politics so that we can do all these other things that we just discussed. Oh, and one thing outside the realm of politics that's worth mentioning is that we need to continue the work of diversifying the media in terms of making sure there's diverse representations of peoples in movies and shows and, of course, video games. because diversity in media definitely does have an important impact on society. Alrighty, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're new here, my name is Justin, and the channel is Red Spirit Mask. We often do videos about African art and culture, and we also like to do videos about video games and superheroes and other nerdy type stuff. Why? Because I like to... Well, one, I have a variety of interests, obviously. I just did a video about politics. But the other reason is because I'm trying to utilize pop culture, nerdy type stuff to get people interested in African art and culture. Is it working? I think it's working so far. So, I'm going to keep at it. But anyway, please like, comment, and subscribe for more.